Okay, so we've just been through the scores for the React challenge, the first one of this bootcamp, and now we're just looking at people's codes. Some very high scores, so well done. And we're just going to go through probably question 2, 3, and 5 if we get time on the beginner training. They seem the hardest questions that people struggled with a little bit. So we can see this one here. So it looks like an input question to me, yeah? So if I open up the training, and I should be able to go to React Training, Beginner, Inputs, and it was question 2, right? So if I skip question 1, I think that's the same. Yeah, that's the same question there. Let's have a look, see maybe... Oh, I think everyone got it right in the end, so well done. Did we have any different ways of writing it? So let's have a look. Vincent, input, type equals text, value equals props.value, placeholder equals props.placeholder. Yeah, so I think everyone got this in the end, yeah? I don't think there's many variations. Aeneas, so we mentioned elegance, right? So can you see how Aeneas's one is laid out a little bit differently to other people's? So do you think she got any penalties there for elegance? Yeah, why would she get a penalty for elegance there? So we got input type equals text, then we've dropped down a line, which is fair enough, you can do that. But then it looks like you've tabbed twice inside of the input. So there's no need for the double indentation, so that probably just gave you a warning about expected 3 tabs indentation, instead got 4, something like that. So just literally deleting that extra tab in there would be absolutely fine. Similar to what Nilofer's done here, yeah? You can just see one clear indentation inside of the input. Yeah, everything else looks okay. Yeah, okay, maybe I don't need to go through that one. And then for me, Vincent's is slightly more readable than someone like Porix. And Porix got this empty line here as well, so he may have been penalised on elegance for that empty line as well. Yeah, so just make sure we take care of these little details, guys. But you were correctly getting your props. We can see that text has 2 props passed into it, a value and a placeholder prop. So therefore you made sure that you passed props into your function, and you access that using the dot notation of props.value and props.placeholder where necessary. Did anyone get a little bit confused with this expect input.props.value to be? Because when I first saw that, I was a little bit confused. I thought yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, so you managed to suss it out in the end, but for me, I found it a little bit confusing because I was thinking that this is directly attached to the props object. And in fact, what prop this is talking about is actually talking about this attribute there. Yeah, it's expecting input, the value attribute of the input tag, to be equal to Donald Trump. Yeah, so it's actually referencing that bit there in our code, in our test, rather than that props.value there. Of course, in this case, one's the key, one's the value, right? One's the attribute, one's the actual value. So they do match up. Just be careful in future that this props is talking about the attribute tag, and this could have been a different name. They coincide in this case, but they might not in the future. Just watch out for that in future questions, yeah, because that's tripped me up before as well. Okay, yeah, any questions on that question? No, I think you all managed to solve it in the end. It's fairly straightforward, right? Is that okay, Ewan? Yeah, you want to go through that at all, that one? I know you haven't seen it yet.
Sure.
You can't, oh, you got it on YouTube or not? You can see it on YouTube as well. Or we'll just move on to the next one and maybe we'll go through that one together, yeah? Okay, the World Champions one, yeah? So this was the one that not everyone got right. So let's take some code that was probably nearly there, but not quite. Labels. Labels. Do we have a labels training? I think we do, right? Training home. Which one's it under? Loops. Is it on inputs as well, actually? It could be inputs as well, right? Nope. It's what? Is it a render training? Nope. Sorry guys, can't find it. Is it a loop? Are we looping over it? Oh yeah, must be. I've got a map function, yeah? Thanks. Let's leave that. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so we had quite a lot of code given to us. So above, we have the skeleton code, and below we have Nilofer's attempt. Okay. So the first thing, we're expected 2 labels. Yeah, so as long as our drivers, where's drivers? Yeah, okay, so drivers is passed in as a prop. And what data type is drivers then, in this case? We've got a curly brace there. Does that mean it's an object? Is it an object? Or is it just an array? It's an array of objects, yeah. These outer curly braces don't say this is an object. They say that this is a bit of JavaScript code, yeah? Or this is something we need to evaluate rather than being a string. So yep, you're quite right, it's an array, and inside of that, in the first case, we have 3 objects. We have Nigel Mansell, don't know how you pronounce, KK, is it? KK Rosberg? And then Alain Prost as well. So, we've got an array. Often how we loop over these things in React is we can use the map function. We'll loop over it for as many times as we have objects. But in our first case, we have 3 objects and we expect the length to be 2. So in other words, we need to filter one of them out first. We need to filter one of them out based on the is world champion condition. So that bit of code was given to us already, right? We had props.drivers.filter. We input each object in turn. Filter will iterate over the array 3 times. And then we check the condition, the property, is world champion. So if it returns true, that gets included in the filtered array. If it returns false, that no longer gets included in the new array. So after the filter has run, we should now have an array of 2 elements. So hopefully that should pass the first test without us having to do anything. What we have to do is do the looping part of rendering our JSX, yeah? And often in React we use the map function to do that. So if we've got an array, we can map over it and return some JSX for each element in the array. In this case we're returning a label. What do we want inside it? Well, does it tell us exactly? Yeah, so we need yeah, we just need a label with some text inside of it, right? That's all we need. Okay. So therefore, can anyone spot where Nilofer's solution has gone wrong? Didn't ask for... Got a label, yep.
He didn't ask for name as a text.
Didn't ask for name as a text. So what were we expecting? We were just expecting the string of the actual name. Whereas instead, you've put name colon and then the actual name. So if we ran this code, I'll get rid of the skeleton template and just run the loafer's code. Obviously we expect it to fail because it wasn't correct. So interestingly enough, the second one passes. Of course it passes, right? Because all of them are false. So there was nothing actually to display. So that's why that one passed. And the first one failed on Nigel Mansell, essentially. So if we look at the raw results, then if you look at the actual bit, see if I can make it slightly bigger. Nope. So if we go under tests and we come down towards the bottom of that blue box, it says actual. That's what Nilofer returned. And she returned as a string, name, colon, Nigel Mansell. But what we expected was just Nigel Mansell. So as Vincent correctly suggested, we don't actually need this name colon here in your code. And then if we run it now, that was it. Yeah, so just a little silly mistake really. Just be careful to check the details again. Make sure that the string that you're returning is matching up exactly with what is expected. Yeah. So yeah, you were correctly using the prop and you were correctly accessing driver.name and you put it in the right place within the map function within the label. So you got most of it right. Just that little difference. Okay. Yeah, I think probably that took people longer or a couple of attempts just because there was a lot of information maybe to process in the question. Yeah, and it took me a while as well. So okay, good. I think we'll probably skip question 4, which was book details. So let's see if there are any differences in the code here. All looking pretty similar. I think we actually did we go through this one yesterday, or I went through it just with Nilofer maybe? Yeah, I think you've all written it absolutely identically, so I think you all got full marks for that one. I think the key thing here to notice was the different selectors that we had, yeah? So when we were setting our book ID, we were finding that by hashtag book ID, which means it's what type of selector in CSS? It's an ID selector. And here we had dot title, so therefore it's a class. And here we just had author as a string, which means there's no specific selector, it's just an actual tag, yeah? We're finding it by the HTML tag of author, which is one of these semantic tags in HTML that describes exactly what that content is. This is the author of the article or the author of a book or something like that. So useful for web searches and stuff, yeah? We can search for the actual author's name. All right, and then the last one. So this was scores. I think this might be a render question, is it? Let's try, see if I can find it. Let's leave that one. And render. Skip. Nope. I'm going to get these right one day. Total score. What does it look like we're doing? We've got some props again, right? Is it a prop one? Score. Sorry, usually I do this beforehand, but obviously my meeting went on a bit long this morning. Yeah. No, I think it's this one, right? Total score. Props. Yeah. Fantastic. Cool. So maybe let's not look at what you've written first and let's solve this again. So on the left-hand side, what have we got? What is total score? Total score is the function, or in React speak, it is the component. Yep. So how do we render a component in React? Well, we put that in its own tag, yeah, using the less than symbol and the greater than symbol, and enclosing our content inside. So we've got a tag or a component called total score. What's scores in this case? We're passing some data in, some scores. It is an array, yep. And what did we talk about yesterday in the workshop? We spoke about React, our React workshop. Yeah, it's a prop, right? Yeah, so it's a property of the total score component. So therefore, this scores is going to get passed to the props object. So that means that to access our scores array inside of our total score component definition here, our declaration of our component here, we can access it using props.scores. So that bit already seems to be done for us. What are we expected to do? Well, total score dot text to equal the total score is 105. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of doing this. What way did you do, guys? Give me one suggestion. You looped across something? Above return, you defined what, the sum or the total?
Yeah,
Okay, so did you do let total or const total or something like that? Yeah. Oh, you just initialized it, yeah? You just initialized it to 0. Okay, understood. Then what did you do? You wrote a for loop? Okay. Oops. That one, yeah? Do I... Just that, or you did something else in your for? Oh, the condition. So you mean the limit, yeah? Where you stop. So where did you stop? I less than something? Score, singular? I less than score? Scores, yeah. Index, like that? Square bracket? No, and then what, I plus plus? Is it scores.length? Or scores.length, yeah, for your limit. Okay. And then what did you do inside of your loop? Total plus equal. Does everyone know what plus equal is short for? So it's the same as doing what? Total equals... Yeah. So if you're not aware of the shorthand, line 5 and line 6 are equivalent. So your score index, like that. Okay. Do you mean scores again, yeah? Like that? Yeah. Now what? Are we down in the return yet, or are we finished with the for loop?
Yes.
Okay. And then we inside here we do the total score is like that. Curly braces, yeah, it's a variable that you've defined. Okay, will that work now? Yeah, you're happy with that, Nalofa? Anyone else? Is that, do we agree with that code?
But here they have written total score.
Return total, what, up the top here?
In the question.
In the question. Yeah, what have I done wrong? I can't see it.
When you return it's written total score dot text 2 equal to. So do we need to consider the same thing?
Is that not the same? The total score is colon.
We have just written the word total.
No, we haven't. We've written the total score is total, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about a variable. If it is not same, so will it give an error?
I don't understand the question. Does anyone else understand the question?
I mean, it's written here total score.
Yeah.
The word total score is taken as a variable name for total.
Yeah. But we don't want to return the word. We want to return the actual.
Yeah, so we can take any variable. I don't know whether I have written total score is equal to plus equal to total. That kind of
Oh, so you've just done something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Total score and total score.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what we call variables, does it? Yeah. Unless it's looking for a total score variable. Yeah. Expect total score dot text. So this total score here, is that what you meant? Okay. So because of this when and the then statement, const total score equals our component. Do we need to name the variable total score as well, or does that not matter? Do we have the freedom to call it whatever we want? We can call it whatever we want, right? Because total score in this case is just a variable that has been assigned to the rendering of the whole total score component. Yeah, so we're looking for the first text node within the total score component. That's what this line here is doing. Yeah, total score dot text. Take the component, look for a text node in it. Does that equal the total score is 226? Hopefully it does, right? Based on us dynamically rendering that variable. Let's see what happens. Okay, I is not defined, so again we should do something like a let in there, right? That will fix that one. Operator plus equal must be spaced. Yeah, so my little syntax error there. I is not defined. Let's get rid of the warnings. And that was it. Right, so yep. As long as we initialized our variable there and I had my correct plus equals there, then that's fine. That absolutely works. Did anyone else have a different approach? Yeah? Do you want me to look at your code now, Porik, or you want to just talk through based on that?
I'll take a bit to look at the codes.
Okay, so let's go and review and see what everyone else did. You're at the top, right? So, can I move across? Nope. Okay. Yeah, so you recognised something about the nature of the questions, did you, Porik? And did it this way instead?
Well, funny thing is, this was, I think, is this question 5 on the props? Was it props or loops?
Question 5 on props, yes?
Yeah. Every time I did props trading, I always got to question 4, but never got to question 5.
Okay.
So I was looking through the video and got some ideas from it, but I never thought of doing a variable like first development.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yep, so I think everyone else initialized some sort of total or accumulated scores variable, right? We've got accumulated scores, total scores. Scores.reduce is essentially creating a sum as well. Yeah, whereas you, to me, noticed the nature of the question in that both test conditions only have 3 scores in them, yeah? So the arrays were conveniently equal in length, which is why you could essentially hard code it and do scores 0, scores 1, scores 2 and add them all together. So that's fine for this case, yeah? What's the drawback of that method for capturing a lot of different use cases?
The drawback would be if they were different lengths of the array.
Yeah, if we had a different length of the array, then your solution would no longer work, but everyone else's would. Yeah, I think everyone else's would, because yeah, we're using reduce. Vincent uses reduce, which is a common way in JavaScript to find, or common modern way, I guess, to find the sum or the average of a group of numbers. We often use reduce. If you haven't learnt about reduce yet, then we're going to won the board challenge. The intermediate board challenge this week, or for the next few days, is going to be on reduce. And also we're talking about some more array methods on Monday. We're talking about map, we're talking about reduce, and we're talking about for each on the Monday workshop. So that will hopefully improve our understanding of reduce, when we can use it, how we use it, and things like that. And what have we got? So Aeneas initialized a variable as well, very similar to what Nalofa did, just with different names, and then both of them used a for loop, yeah, which in this simple case to me works very nicely. Yeah, so you used a long variable name, so you had to sort of drop down a line, right, to use that. Yeah.
It's going to use the score, but then the function score facts.
Yeah, sure, that works. Yeah, so I think that's almost identical as to what we just worked through. And Richard has just done it slightly differently. I think that's absolutely fine in this case, because there's not too much going on. There's not too much logic going on, right? We can concisely write scores.reduce all in one line. If there was a lot more going on with that reduce function, I would rather write it outside of the return and calculate that first. I think that would be more readable, similar to what everyone else has done. But it's absolutely fine to use JavaScript inline inside of our JSX. Yeah, that's not a problem. But I would only do it with simple functions, yeah, with simple things that are easily readable on a line or two. There's also one difference that people might notice between Richard's and one other difference between Richard's and Vincent's solutions. So they both use reduce. Can anyone spot what it is? So that's Vincent's at the top and Richard's reduce down here.
One of them used an index and the other didn't.
One of them used an index. So where's the index in here? We've got reduce with 2 arguments, total and score.
The index is 0.
You mean this bit here?
Yeah.
See that 0. So reduce can take a number of functions, but a number of arguments, but the only required one is again a callback function, and that is all that Richard has done, right? He's just created an arrow function there with 2 arguments, A and B, and just added A and B together, right? Simple. Yeah, so this 0 is an optional argument, and Aeneas called it an index. I don't really like that term because I don't really think it's an index. So what do we generally refer to that as? Yeah, it's the initial value of the accumulator. Yeah, so it's the initial value of whatever this first argument of the function is. So what... I can't actually see our values. Let's have a look. So we had 3 values. Don't worry. Let's say they're 34, 35, and 36, right, for now. We had 3 values in our array, and we wanted to add them together. Let's go even easier. Let's say they're 1, 2, and 3. So on Vincent's one, he set the initial value of total to be 0. Then he added on the score of 1. Then the next iteration, add on 2. The next iteration, add on 3 to get your final total of 6, right? If we had 1, 2, and 3 in our array. So that would run how many times if we had an array of 3 scores? How many times would the reduce callback function run? 3, right? Yeah, because we've initialized it at 0. We add on the 1. That's our first iteration. Next iteration, add on the 2. Next iteration, add on the 3. 3 separate iterations. How many times will Richard's reduce function run? 3 as well, or a different number? So he doesn't initialize the total to 0. So what's the initial value of his a variable, which is equivalent to the total in this case? Will it be 0 as well, or will it be something different? You think it'd be the same? Any ideas? Anyone else? If you haven't looked at reduce yet, I know this is hard, but for those that maybe have, then do you think the initial value of Richard's a will also be 0, or take a different value?
No, we start at 0.
We'll start at 0, we're saying. Start at 0. Yeah, go ahead, Richard. So instead, what does it do?
It's the value of the first element.
Yeah, so if we don't initialize the accumulator to a given value, instead it initializes itself as the first element in the array. So in this case, that is going to be the 1, yeah, if we're using that array of 1, 2, and 3. So initially this time, A is 1, and therefore B takes the second element in the array. So B is 2. So on our first iteration, we've already added 1 plus 2. Next iteration, we add on that final element of 3. So Richard's algorithm actually only runs twice to add up the 3 numbers, and Vincent's runs 3 times. So when we're summing things, it's okay to do that. That's perfectly valid, yeah, to have a initializer of 0, but it's not actually required in this case, yeah. There will be cases when it is required, which is why we have the optional argument. But in this case, perhaps it's a little bit more succinct to write it Richard's way, yeah. We'll definitely go through reduce more on Monday, but that was a little taster, if you will. It is now almost 12 o'clock, and because, oh no, I've set you up at 5 past, right? Yeah, I've set Ewan up to do his own React challenge at 5 past, just because there was an issue with his account earlier. We can maybe just try 5 minutes on one intermediate question, if that would help, yeah, Porik? Can you try and tell me which one it was again? It was a scores-based one, yeah? Any questions on that first before we move on? Nope, okay. So let me try and quickly get to intermediate React. And intermediate. And do we know what it was? Let's have a look. You think it's state? It was question 2, maybe this one, Porik, or?
That was one of them, yeah. And then there was the other one just underneath it. There's 2.
So they both use state by the looks of it. So if we go to the state training, hopefully we're going to find them, yeah? Awesome. Okay, so let's just start with that one. Did you have an attempt for it? Can I use your attempt as a
No,
base?
because I was not confident with my code.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just reset it when I figured out I could.
Maybe let's take Aeneas's attempt in there. Oh dear, she said. Is that all right? Do you mind me doing that? No. So it's a good way to learn, right? First things first, probably indentation, right? So we're trying to render a function. Let's indent it. Close the function.
I mean, I didn't even know what order to take it.
Then you return something. Okay.
Well, you're not better than me, so.
you got further than Porrick, perhaps. Let's see. So what we got to do? Let's try and work it out, yeah? So we've got an average score component. Does it have any props passed to it? No, there's no props listed after that, right? So it's just the component rendered as is. But state.firstScore. So it looks like we need to set something in the state.
No,
Yeah?
I didn't even know what it was, so
Yeah.
I was basically spend the next half hour reading about state.
Okay, so you've already been forced to read about state. Usually we would define state in the constructor. Yeah, so classes can take a constructor method. And inside of that, we can create a state object, which we refer to as this.state. And we put that equal to an object. And we give it any properties we want within that object. In this case, we need a first score and a second score, right? Let's drop this down, I think. We have a...
I didn't quite understand how you render that state.
Yep, so we're going to have to do that in a second. We're going to have to render that state as well. So I'm going reasonably fast, but we've only really got 4 minutes. So first score. What do we want that to be? It says in the question, right? 78. Fantastic. So let's actually hard code that into our state. That's our initial value that we want to display in our application when we render it. It might change at some point, which is why we're storing it in the state. We expect it to change in the future, as opposed to a prop. That's just going to be one value throughout the history of the component, throughout the lifetime of the component. State, we want something to change. Okay, so first score and second score. This is an object, right? So I need a comma between my key value pairs. And that looks okay, right? And this dot state over there. Something like that. So thank you, yep. Me trying to do it quickly and be lazy. And end up taking longer. So that's 81, fantastic. We expect wrapper.text to equal the average score is 80. We've already got a function. Did you get given that function, or did you write that function? Yes, you got given it, right? I think
I wrote the function.
you wrote this. Okay, cool.
Then I realized about state, so it's probably the only thing.
All right. So let me.
Because then I just got confused about how we render the constructor.
So we've got our render. Inside, we want to return something, right? Return a div saying the average score is, and you're invoking the function to get the actual score. If you want to invoke a function inside there, you're going to have to put it in curly braces as well, right? And then got our return, got our render, and we close the component. If you see any sort of missed brackets or something, please pull me up on that. So you wanted to create an average score function by the looks of it. What we often do if we want to create a function inside of a class-based component is just write it there between the constructor and the render. And we can just write it like that. Average score. We don't need the function keyword. This is a class method, so we can just literally write average score like that. And yeah, and then do that essentially. Inside of there, we want to add the two scores, yeah? I'll tell you what I'm going to do as well, just because we're using state. I am going to alright, let's try it your way. Let's try it your way. How would we calculate the total from the two values that we've stored in state? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to do it my way then. So this dot set state, and let's give that a total, and we'll set it equal to this dot state. Oh, sorry. This dot state dot first score plus this dot state dot second score. Yeah, so we can access our state variables by using the this dot state notation. And then I'm actually setting our new value in the state. So I've initialized it to 0, and then I'm going to update it when we call the average score component. Yeah. Alright, maybe I haven't done it the best way. Trying to rush. Did you do something similar? You just literally did it directly. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do it, right? There was a new score as well? Oh no, that was a different question. So instead of doing it as a separate method in Aeneas, let's do it all in line, right? It's probably easiest. The average score is this dot state dot first score plus this dot state dot second score, right? I think that's the simplest way to do it. The average score is this dot state dot first score plus this dot state dot second score. Get rid of that. See what happens. Okay. Where's my error, guys? Syntax error. Don't need that. Say again, sorry? Oh, yep. Divide by 2 as well. So we could either use 2 or we would use... I'll just use 2 for now, right? Quicker. Don't think that was my only error though, was it? No. Yeah, okay. Expected to call super. Okay, the average score is 80. So what score am I getting? Yep, so we need to round it. So we can do a math.round beforehand. The whole thing, yeah. And we get it, yeah. So, lessons from that, I guess how do we access state? Well, first, how do we set state? So in a class-based component, we do it our initial state values within the constructor. And the constructor will generally look like that. Yeah, you'll invoke the constructor, inside your invoke super, and then you can set the state. This dot state equals, pass it an object with all the key value pairs that you want, and that's the end of your constructor. If we need additional methods, let's put them inside of, between the constructor and the render, and then we'll use a render and return our JSX as usual. We can either assign the score here to a separate variable, or we can render it all in line. This is getting quite long, so I might have wanted to say average equals all of that, right? Math.round. Yeah, all of that basically. And then instead I could have just said the average score is average, yeah? And that should also work, I hope. Yep, fantastic. So how do we access the state? Well, once we've set it, we can access it using this dot state dot the property name or the key name of our object. Don't expect you to fully understand perhaps at this stage, but it's a good first look at state, yeah? So the intermediate training on React. We will go through state next Thursday morning in a bit more detail. In the meantime, if you have questions on it, of course, I can deal with you one-on-one, yeah? Have you started, Ewan?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. So any questions on that, Porrick, or you want to do just one more?
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in, I agree, if you've never seen state before.
What, like, essentially, what is the difference between props and state?
So when we passed props into our component, then we just wanted that component to display the data as we sent it within our component. Yeah, when we did the workshop yesterday, I passed in Boris and I wanted it to display Boris.
Yeah.
If I wanted it to initially display Boris, but then as a result of some user interaction, I wanted the state of Boris to change into a different value, then I would have used state rather than props. Or I could have used both. I could have sent the initial value as a prop, but stored it in the state of my new component so that later on I can change it. Yeah, state is when we're dealing with data that we expect to change in our application. Props can't really change on their own, right? We send them in, and then they can change, I guess, if we re-render the whole component, but just to re-render part of it by a user interaction.
But what if you want to make this initial data information dynamic? Because
Yeah, so let's say the first score came in as a prop. Sorry, props. And the first score we could have set to this dot props dot first score. Yeah, so that's coming dynamically from somewhere else, from a parent component, and it's our initial value within this one. Then maybe within our component we have some sort of add new score method. Yeah, and that will increase the score at some point. So initially on our first render we might display just the prop space score, and then once we've added a new score, that will get re-rendered, the page will get updated with the new score visible. Yeah, so that's when we're using state. We have an initial value, something changes the value, we update the page with the changed information, with the new state of that information or that component. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's just an object. You know, it's just a JavaScript object. Yeah, this dot state. But as humans, it's nice to differentiate these things.
yeah.
We expect the state to change, so let's store it in the state so we can easily manipulate it. And React itself has some useful methods of dealing with state. I started to write one of them and then sort of backed down and decided to do it just an inline way. But there's a set state method, yeah, and that allows us to change the state easily and force the React component to re-render, to display that new information. Cool, does that help a bit more?
Yeah.
incrementally we get there with state, right? And we'll start painting a fuller picture. Shall we leave it there for now? So it is 12:15, so yeah, I can deal with any individual queries now, and yeah, then it should be lunch break, and we'll go through the board challenge review and topics after lunch. Fantastic. Thank you.